Discord is up and running, and there's a lot of new members. Interesting conversations can be had in all of the groups, including Starfort repositories, requestories for information, films, Tartar source, images and texts, information about the next reset, as well as other lost places, including our studies on former territories of Tartaria. We even have a section where we can watch films together. And amazing conversations are happening in the voice channels. Here's a little peek at some of the information being exchanged in the voice channels right now.
About ABBA. Oh, hi, I'm David. It started with looking at the Visitors, and their last album came out shortly after a film called The Visitor was released. And so the day and year that The Visitor came out, there was the second biggest hotel fire in the U.S. at the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino, which was basically like designed to look like a giant Mayan pyramid. And the last biggest hotel fire that had happened in the U.S. prior to the MGM Grand was the Weinkauf Hotel in I think 1947. And so that film, The Visitor, that was released the day and year of the second biggest hotel fire, actually centers around the location of the first biggest hotel fire at the Weinkauf in Atlanta, Georgia. And so that gets really strange because it's like, it's a probability thing. It's like, why does this film, it's a strange film in the first place. It's like, why does this film center around the location of the first biggest hotel fire and is released on the day of the second, when the second is supposed to be a mistake? It's supposed to be a happenstance thing. And there's lots of references that are very strange in the film, where basically like a girl undoes a fire escape with her mind, and it drops down, and all these people kind of get around it and look at it, and it's like, what is it? What is this scene? Why are we looking at a fire escape being dismantled from a building? And so the big thing that happened with the MGM fire was that they had to put all these security, or not security, like safety precautions in place for hotels following that first biggest fire. But the MGM Grand didn't have fire escapes, and no alarm went off, and no, all these people died in their beds. It's just crazy. But so that gets interesting. And then the other thing is, um, Stanley Kubrick had asked MGM, he had proposed his Napoleon film way back when, and very shortly, within like months of MGM turning him down for his Napoleon film, production started for a film called Waterloo about Napoleon. And it shortly after that film was released, ABBA released Waterloo. So the film is called Waterloo, and if you play Waterloo with Waterloo, the two sync up like crazy. And even speaks to Kubrick in different ways. What about Livingston? A song about should we go to the moon or not? It gets really strange. But yeah, those are a couple things to just kind of give you the tip of the iceberg. Right. Well, the kicker is this guy Hal Craig. So the writer of right. So the writer of Waterloo had also directed a film called The Message, which was originally called Muhammad, Messenger of God. And there was actually a siege on Washington over the release of the film in 1977. So hostages were taken, I think like 100 hostages over the release of this film, because from Islamic terrorists who were concerned about the film showing the face of Muhammad. But it's kind of weird because it's like when they were releasing the film, they were kind of like boasting and implying that that's what they were doing, even though that never happens in the movie. And this guy Hal Craig had also he's written a book about the Kabbalah and Mecca and some of the early people following Muhammad. And so it's like it's a story that is around Muhammad, but not actually with Muhammad. So it gets kind of weird like that. It's like all of his followers. But so this film was set to be released on the 9th of March 1977, written by Hal Craig, same guy who did Waterloo. But what's weird is that the siege lasted for 3 days, from the 9th to the 11th. And on the 11th was the release of another Hal Craig film called Airport 77, about hostages taking over an airplane. And so it gets really strange. So you're like, you produced a movie about the birth of Islam, that, hostages were taken for 3 days, and then 3 days later you produce a film about a plane hijacking by terrorists, and the 9th and the 11th respectively. And it's the thing that, like, this guy was already tripping me out. I wasn't sure if he was like a real person, because I was like looking at his Wikipedia, and it's just so outlandish. Like, he's got a twin brother named Dick, like Mad Men or whatever, and it's like he's written speeches for the Queen supposedly, and all this stuff. And I'm like, who the f- is this guy? But the only image that exists of him online is with like two other people or three other people. Maybe I have to look. And it doesn't specify which one is actually Hal Craig. And while I was researching him, I went on a internet radio thing, that had a pretty wide reach. Within like a couple days of me doing that radio thing, everything connected to Hal Craig on Wikipedia disappeared. So like, he had a long page. The page is no longer there, but he's still on well, it exists in German actually, but all other languages are gone. Each one letter removed. Arthur C. Clarke, in his book, what is it? Can't remember what it's called, but The Lost Worlds of 2001. He says that the probability for HAL being each one letter removed from IBM is exactly 6 squared, which he found out because of a Macintosh computer that was gifted him after the release of 2001, that had like the most superior probability, figure out the probability of something back then. But he still, despite it being fucking 6 cubed, he still says there's no way it was intentional. Yet he just feels like he's privy to everything. Arthur C. Clarke. He's like, why would he not tell me that? You know. I mean, it's just so obvious. There's points in the film where, David Bowman will be saying, "How do you read me?" And IBM will flash in his helmet, in the reflection, like back and forth as he says Hal. So he's like, Hal, IBM, Hal, IBM. It's so like, it's pretty ridiculous. I've looked at every single existing available document on Napoleon in Stanley Kubrick's archives in Elephant and Castle in London. And so it's like a lockdown facility at a basically an art college. But you go in there and you have to put all your stuff in a locker. They like give you a little pat down, and you can't use pens. You can't take pictures. You got to wear gloves. It's like this. It's a trippy place. But I went there for multiple days last year, and I went through every single box on Napoleon, and there was a few things that stuck out that I thought were really, really interesting. What was there was a quote that I came across when somebody was asking him to be interviewed about Napoleon early on, and the explanation that he gave for not wanting to be interviewed was that, quote, he couldn't be 10% honest about his views on history, and people, and that is true as well for how things came to be in his own career. So he says he can't be 10% honest about how he ended up where he ended up in his career, and he can't be 10% honest about what he actually believes about history. I'm like, 10%, like, that's not much.
That's not a whole lot, no.
Other various Kabbalistic texts that, Pardes Ramonim, the Garden of Pomegranates, which Israel Regarde took the title from Ramak, from 16th century Spanish Kabbalist. That's so funny because we say Abba, but it's if you say it in Hebrew, it's Abba. Abba's father. So like the two upper, in the supernal triad of the Kabbalistic tree, you have
Yeah.
Abba and Ima. You have the father and the mother. There's Chochmah and Bina. And so it's funny that we say, Abba, because it's like, dude, that's father.
Like the Heavenly Father, Abba.
Right. It's really profound, actually. Like the way that they mirror their name, where you have the ABBA, because when you're looking at the Kabbalistic tree, if you say Abba and Ima, there's a paradox in the tree of unfoldment, and it works both ways. The gematria of the Sphirot. So if you take the gematria Chesed, which is 72, and you look at the gematria of Gevura, which is opposite it. So you have mercy and severity, right? The uppermost Sphirot of the terrestrial realm. So you have the supernal triad above, but you have these two pillars represented in the lower worlds. And so the tops of those pillars, their value, if you say 72 times 3, that's 216. And then 216 is the gematria of Gevura. If you say 6 times 6 times 6, that's the gematria of Gevura as well. That's 216. But it's about the unfoldment. So you're saying, when you're looking at the two pillars, it's Yakin and Boaz. They translate directly to established in strength. And so Yakin on the right is established, and then Boaz on the left is in strength. But it's a paradox that's actually pointing back at the right side, because if you say this is established in, and then the next one is in strength, it's actually pointing back at the other one to say that that's where the strength is. So Crowley did the same thing with love is the law, love under will, because it's like you're basically like we assume where power exists, and we're like, oh, what's at the top is in power, and it's like no, you're looking at the thing that's the foundation for the next thing. Obviously the power is there. And so it's like a copy of an imitation, basically, where you have a duplicity, you have a polarity, and we project the duality into that. And so, like, that's the reason why, like, Gevura will traditionally translate simply as judgment, but European occultists like to call it severity. Why is it severity? Severity because of the way that we're oriented to the left. Like, if we were more, oriented towards the right hemisphere, the same conflict wouldn't exist with Gevura. So Gevura becomes severe when we orient ourselves compulsively in the way that we do. And so that's yeah. Yeah, there's that trick you can do if you take 8 trees of life and you basically interlock them into, you create an equilibrized figure. So everything, it's like if you're looking at a sphere and every point is compensated in its vectors, where it's the significance of like a hexagram. But if you continue on with that same framework, you can do a thing. If you take 8 trees of life and you push them into each other and you connect them all at Keter, you end up with 72 Sphirot. Because because the connector being Keter doesn't necessarily count if they're all meeting there. So you end up with this really profound effect because the 72 names of God, etc. Um, Nassim Haramein likes to talk about that, but he's a little. I wouldn't call him pseudoscience because he's actually peer reviewed, but he's a little out there for some people to accept as Since that time, I've realized much more in that way that you can work with that configuration where you lay the 22 arcana as a Vesica Pisces, and so I hadn't thought to just do it with the letters themselves. Like I was using the Roman numerals with the arcana, and I was like, well, what happens if you just ignore the Roman numerals and just work with the letters in their own order, and then you can begin to see the implications of the Saudi star issue, where Crowley switched out the star and the emperor with each other, and all the implications of that, which is huge. Basically, if you follow through with that, you can see why Trump is president. You have the Hebrew letter Pei is associated with the tower. And then when you do Crowley's switch, you end up, if you attach the emperor to that, but you make the emperor Tzadi, you still have this thing where basically you have Pei means mouth. So the Trump tower in the Arcana literally means a mouth. And so if you take if you attribute Tzadi to the emperor, then the emperor then means fishhook. And so you basically have a fishhook next to a mouth, and the emperor is Aries, and the tower is Mars. And so you have Mars rules Aries, and so there's this resonance between the two. So this isn't and it has to do with Sadi being, wisdom, Sadiq, so you've basically separated the two lovers of the emperor and the empress, and who would normally be looking at each other. Now when the Empress is looking in what would be his direction, she's getting the star, who's actually looking the other way. So it almost looks like you're looking at Lilith or something, like with the star card, and she's she's playing the role of Aquarius, where she's pouring out the celestial flow, the emanated flow. And so it gets really weird, like she, because so she becomes a window to the Hierophant that would be on the other side, because hey means window, just like hey of Tetragramatron, right? So if you look, it becomes very significant in terms of the way that the pictographs align with each other when you lay out that arrangement. If you do it just normal with the 22 arcana, you end up with Aleph on one side, and Lamed on the other. So you have El, so it's the abbreviation of Elohim, is actually like basically bookending the name of 22. And so but then if you adjust for the Crowley switch, and you move all the cards over accordingly in relationship to that, you can do a trick where if you end up with on one side you have the sun, which is Raish, and then flanking that would be Lust, or what would traditionally in the Rider deck would be Strength, but that's Leo. So you have, just like what I was saying with like Aries and Mars with the Emperor in the Tower, here you have Leo, associated with the Sun. So you have the Sun across from Leo. They're resonant. They work the same way, and so I'm pretty sure that this is the reason why ultimately Crowley would call himself the Beast 666, relating to the Babylonian Sun Square. In court, they asked him why he called himself the Beast, and they're like, "Isn't that kind of a gnarly thing to call yourself?" And he was like, "No, it means sunshine. You can call me Little Sunshine." Did you say Leviathan? Is that what you said? Leviathan is actually what's written around, that the sigil that Anton LaVey likes to use with the lightning bolt, and then also it's when you have the 5-pointed star with the goat or whatever, they'll often write it around in the circle. So yeah, there's something about that. Is it in the Ba here? I forget. Is it Gomorrah? Where they're basically talking about the nullification of the Klipot, and that the Leviathan is the last that's left when the whole thing is being essentially alchemized, or however you want to put it. Dude, I didn't even know that there was a book of the silent film Metropolis. So you're saying it's based on a book? Yeah, I'd be really interested to look at that. I know that the same people, not Fritz Lang, but the team of the people that were putting together Metropolis, their film right before it was the Golem. So they went from the Golem to Metropolis. It's kind of strange. Um, but yeah, Metropolis syncs flawlessly with Lady Gaga's The Fame Monster, and the Fame Monster is actually referencing the Babylon wanting to make a name for itself. So it's all about fame. Like, we want to be famous, right? And so yeah, that gets pretty interesting.
Wait,
Oh, they had a bunch of the film as they were working on it was actually destroyed. It's kind of funny. It sounds like the same story as like Lucifer Rising, which may not even be true. Where Kenneth Anger claims that Bobby Beausoleil ran off with the film and then it got destroyed. Most of it got destroyed, and what we're seeing is really just like the bits that are left or whatever. Either way you take it, the same principle happened with the Holy Mountain, where a bunch of the film got destroyed, and then Jodorowsky didn't necessarily know how it was going to be completed, and then he got contacted by John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and they basically paid him, however $1 million, whatever, to complete the film. So, and they asked not to be included in the credits. The only reason I know this, yeah, he gave him a lot of money. But yeah, it's actually in the audio commentary for Fondo and Liz, which is another Jodorowsky film. So Jodorowsky says it himself, the whole story about what happened with John Lennon. But if you watch the audio commentary from Jodorowsky on The Holy Mountain, he makes no mention of it. So it's really strange. It's like, wow, you're doing this. So why are you saying it in this commentary for a different film about this other film, but you don't say it while you're doing the commentary for the film itself. Really bizarre. Yeah, I don't know. He almost got hung in Mexico for Fondo and Liz. People were so upset about the ending. People were very offended. Oh, do I want to spoil Fondo and Liz for you? That's another pairing, kind of a exploration of the two people's shadow, while they're looking for this, basically the classic Great Valley, obscured by clouds kind of thing. Um, I think it is tar. Isn't that what they're looking for? I believe that's what it's called. Oh, you know it. You know Fondo and Liz.